My name is Jane, and I'm 29 years old. Last week, I received the invitation I'd been dreading for months. Only, it wasn't an invitation. It was a single text message from my mother, Cynthia, arriving at 11:47 p.m. No greeting. No excitement. Just a demand wrapped in casual cruelty. She wrote, "Princess's wedding is confirmed at Sterling Vineyard. Since you already work there, make yourself useful. We need you on event staff to keep costs down. Don't embarrass us." There it was. My sister's name is Princess, a name they gave her at birth as a prophecy. My name is Jane, a name they gave me because it was convenient. The Sterling Vineyard isn't just where I work. It's the property I secretly bought 3 years ago. It's the empire I built while they were busy worshipping at the altar of my sister's vanity. They think I'm a concierge. They think I'm staff. And for one weekend, I decided to let them believe it. Because sometimes, the only way to show people exactly who they are is to give them exactly what they asked for. Before we get into exactly how much that bottle of wine cost me, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I want to see how far this story travels. I pulled my 10-year-old sedan up to the service entrance of the Sterling Vineyard and Estate an hour later. The gravel crunched beneath my tires, a sound that usually filled me with pride. I had personally selected this specific crushed granite for its acoustic quality and drainage properties 2 years ago. Today, however, it just sounded like the grinding of teeth. My father? Richard. He was waiting by the loading dock. He looked every inch the distinguished patriarch in his linen suit and Panama hat. A costume purchased on credit to play the role of the wealthy landowner. When I stepped out of the car, he didn't open his arms. He didn't smile. He thrust a heavy, industrial-grade garment steamer into my chest. "Good. You made it," he said, checking his watch as if I were late. "Princess's rehearsal dress has wrinkles in the silk. Steam it immediately. And be careful. That dress costs more than your car." I took the heavy machine without a word. The weight of it settled in my arms. A physical manifestation of my place in this family. I wasn't a daughter returning home for a celebration. I was a utility. A device to be used until the job was done. I walked past him into the main hall, the scent of expensive lilies hitting me like a wall. The estate was transformed. They had spent $250,000 on flowers and decor alone. White hydrangeas cascaded from every balcony. Silk ribbons danced in the breeze. It was breathtaking. And it was nauseating. I knew for a fact my father didn't have $250,000. I knew because I had seen the credit reports when I secretly bought his bad debt off a collection agency last year to keep him out of court. They were burning money they didn't have to impress people who didn't care. All while treating the actual owner of the venue like hired help. "Jane, my mother, Cynthia," shouted from the terrace. "Thank God. Princess's dog just made a mess near the altar. Clean it up before the photographer gets here." Princess, my sister, was standing nearby, holding a glass of champagne and laughing at something her maid of honor said. She didn't even look at me. She just pointed vaguely at the pile on the pristine white stone pavers. I set down the steamer and walked over to the supply closet. Maria, my head of housekeeping, was standing there. She froze when she saw me reaching for the cleaning supplies. "Ms. Jane," she whispered, her eyes wide with horror. "Please. Let me. You shouldn't be doing this. You are the owner." I put a finger to my lips, shaking my head gently. "Not today. Maria. Today. I am whatever they say I am. Just keep the team quiet. I need them to dig their own grave. And I don't want anyone taking the shovel out of their hands." Maria nodded, her expression tightening into a mask of professional neutrality, though I could see the fury in her eyes. She handed me the spray bottle and the towels. I walked back out to the terrace and got down on my hands and knees in front of my sister and her friends. I scrubbed the stone until it sparkled. I listened to them talk about the honeymoon in the Maldives, about the custom diamonds, about how lucky Princess was to be born into such a generous family. I didn't say a word. I just scrubbed, and as I wiped away the mess, I realized something. This wasn't humiliation. This was research. I was an anthropologist studying a dying species. They thought they were kings and queens of this estate. But they were just guests. And guests can be evicted. I stood up, smoothed my polo shirt, and picked up the steamer. The weekend was just beginning. The rehearsal dinner that evening was an exercise in performative wealth. Richard had reserved the founder's table, a massive slab of reclaimed oak overlooking the vineyards at sunset. He sat at the head, radiating the false confidence of a man playing with house money. I stood in the shadows near the service station, holding a tray. Invisible in my black polo shirt. My job was to ensure their glasses never went empty. A task made difficult by the speed at which they were consuming the vintage Merlot. The conversation was a predictable loop of self-congratulation. Princess talked about her dress fitting, her skincare routine, the magazine feature she was sure they would get. Cynthia nodded along, occasionally shooting sharp looks at the waitstaff if a crumb lingered too long on the tablecloth. I watched them, feeling a strange detachment. It was like watching actors on a stage, reciting lines from a play I had already read. They were so convinced of their own importance, so oblivious to the precariousness of their reality. Then, Richard clapped his hands, signaling for attention. He turned to the sommelier, a young man named Thomas, who knew me well and looked terrified. "Bring us the reserve list," Richard boomed. "We are celebrating tonight. I want something special. Something that says, royalty." Thomas hesitated, glancing at me. I gave him a subtle nod. Let him have it. Thomas returned with the heavy leather-bound book. Richard flipped through it with exaggerated scrutiny, finally stopping on a page near the back. "This one," he declared, pointing a thick finger at the entry. "The 1992 Screaming Eagle Cabernet Magnum." Thomas cleared his throat. "Sir, that bottle is $20,000. Richard waved a dismissive hand. "Excellent. Bring it out. My daughter is worth it." The table murmured in appreciation. $20,000. A year's salary for some people. A down payment on a house. Gone in an hour of drinking. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. I knew exactly how much debt Richard was in. I knew he had maxed out every credit line he had. He didn't have $20,000. Thomas brought the bottle, presenting it like a holy relic. He uncorked it, poured a taste for Richard, who swirled it, sniffed it, and nodded sagely, as if he could tell the difference between this and box wine. "Pour," he commanded, as Thomas moved around the table, filling glasses. Richard caught my eye. He beckoned me over with a crook of his finger. "Jane, come here." I walked over, my face impassive. "Yes, Richard." He leaned back, swirling the $20,000 wine in his glass. "You know, we should thank you. Since you work here, we can put this on your employee tab." "Right. Get that discount." He laughed. A loud, barking sound that grated on my nerves. "Consider it your contribution to the wedding. Since you didn't get your sister a gift." The table laughed with him, a ripple of amusement at the expense of the servant. I looked at him. I looked at my mother, who was sipping her wine with a smug smile. I looked at Princess, who was too busy admiring her ring to notice. And in that moment, I made a choice. I didn't argue. I didn't explain that employee discounts didn't apply to museum-grade vintage wines. I didn't tell him that $20,000 was more than he had spent on my entire education. I just nodded. "Of course," I said, my voice calm. "Even, I'll take care of it." Richard beamed. "Victorious. See, I knew you were good for something." He turned back to his guests, dismissing me. I walked to the point-of-sale terminal. Thomas was watching me, his eyes wide. "Ms. Jane, are you sure?" he whispered. I took the check from him. I pulled out my personal black card, the one with the limitless limit. The one I earned through sleepless nights and ruthless negotiations. I swiped the card. $20,000. Approved. I signed the receipt with a flourish. This wasn't a purchase. It was an investment. It was the price of clarity. I was buying a front-row seat to their destruction. And $20,000 was a bargain for the show I was about to watch. I put the receipt in my pocket, right next to my phone, where a notification from my bank confirmed the transaction. Sunk cost, I told myself. Just a sunk cost. I walked back into the shadows and watched them drink my wine, savoring the taste of a freedom they didn't even know I had bought. I slipped away while they were still congratulating Richard on his taste in wine. I walked through the service corridors, past the bustling kitchen where the chefs nodded to me with a mixture of respect and confusion, wondering why the owner was wearing a polo shirt and carrying a tray. I punched my code into the private elevator at the rear of the estate. The doors slid open, and I stepped into the silence. My suite takes up the entire top floor of the north wing. It has floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the valley, a soaking tub carved from a single piece of granite, and a bed that costs more than my parents' first house. I stripped off the event staff shirt and threw it in the corner. I poured myself a glass of water from the tap, my water, from my filtration system, on my land, and stood by the window, looking down at the lights of the rehearsal dinner. From up here, they looked small, Insignificant. But the $20,000 receipt burning a hole in my pocket felt heavy. It wasn't the money. I make $20,000 while I sleep. It was the principle. It was the memory of 10 years ago. Sitting at a different table. Begging for help. I was 19. I had been accepted into a top-tier business program. I needed $5,000 to secure my spot and cover the first semester's gap in my scholarship. Richard had looked at me, sighing, as if I were asking for a kidney. We just don't have it. Jane, he'd said. The market is down. You'll have to figure it out. Be resourceful. 2 weeks later, they bought Princess a brand new convertible for her 16th birthday. It cost $40,000. They paid cash. I found out later where that cash came from. It was from the trust fund my grandmother, Eleanor, had left for my education. They had raided it, forging my signature on the release forms, justifying it to themselves the whole time. They told themselves I was smart enough to survive without it. They told themselves Princess needed the car to fit in, to be happy, to be safe. That's the narcissist's math. It's a twisted equation my parents have been solving my entire life. They look at their children and they weigh our breaking points. They saw that I was made of iron, that I could endure neglect, hunger, and disappointment without crumbling. So, they gave me nothing. They saw that Princess was made of glass, that a single word of denial would shatter her. So, they gave her everything. They punished me for my strength and rewarded her for her fragility. They taxed my resilience to subsidize her entitlement. For years, I thought if I just worked harder, if I became successful enough, they would finally respect me. I built this empire in the dark. I bought distressed properties, turned them around, and sold them for triple the value. And when Richard's gambling debts and bad investments started to catch up with him 5 years ago, I didn't let him drown. I didn't tell him either. I just bought the debt. He thinks he's a financial wizard who miraculously escaped bankruptcy. He thinks his luck turned. He doesn't know that his luck is his daughter, the one he calls useless, quietly wiring funds to shell companies to pay off his creditors. I became the architect of their comfort, the invisible steel beams holding up their house of cards. I did it because I wanted to prove I was better than them. I wanted to hold the deed to their lives so that one day, when the moment was right, I could call it in. I looked down at the party one last time. Richard was soaking up praise for wine I had paid for. Princess spun in her silk dress, unaware her wedding was funded by the sister she treated like a servant. They were celebrating on the deck of the Titanic and I was the iceberg. I went to sleep in $4,000 sheets. Tomorrow was the wedding. And tomorrow, the bill would come due. The morning smelled like hairspray and panic. I was summoned at 6 a.m. Not to celebrate, but to kneel on the floor and hold the train of Princess's $15,000 gown. For 2 hours. I crawled on command while photographers captured her effortless perfection. I was the invisible machinery behind her shine. When they broke for breakfast, my mother dragged me into the hallway. The honeymoon suite card was declined. $5,000 a night. Richard's Amex already maxed out. I explained calmly. She demanded I override it. Richard arrived, hungover and furious, accusing me of being useless for refusing to commit fraud. Something in me shut off. No pain, just clarity. I stepped away. Then I texted the front desk, "Do not override. If he yells, call security." That evening, the reception glittered. Richard toasted family and sacrifice with champagne I had bought, in a venue he didn't own. Then the doors opened. Arthur Sterling walked in. The man Richard had begged for 15 years walked straight past him to me, in front of everyone. Sterling asked for my signature as proprietor. My father laughed, called me staff. Sterling corrected him. I owned the estate, the resort chain, and his debt. As the room froze, Sterling revealed another issue, the wedding dress. It had been paid for using the Eleanor Educational Trust, my inheritance. A bond my grandmother hid for me. Forged. Stolen. I named it plainly. Embezzlement. Richard called it a loan. I called it a crime. I instructed security to remove them and informed them the police were already en route. Sterling turned his back on my father without a word. The fallout was total. Foreclosure. Restitution. A marriage that lasted 3 months. I never spoke to them again. I took the recovered money and founded the Jane and Eleanor Grant, helping women escape financial abuse. Months later, I sat on my balcony overlooking the vineyards, sipping a wine I bought for myself. It didn't taste like anger. It tasted like freedom. I hadn't just bought a vineyard. I had bought my life back.